The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, America. Good morning, world. Good morning, CHD. Welcome once again. My name is Michael Kane. I am the Director of Advocacy here at Children's Health Defense. And today we have MAHA, the USDA, ASAP. Please, we are bringing on Angela Huffman, President of Farm Action. She just led a group of signatories on a letter to Secretary Rollins at the USDA to talk about what the future of food needs to be. Then we have the legendary Meryl Nass coming on COVID, cancer causes with the amazing Dr. Ryan Cole. You do not want to miss a minute of today's show, so stay with us the whole time. Before we bring Angela on, as usual, have just a couple of headlines. It is election day throughout the country. Get out and vote. And me here in New York City, we have Zohran Mamdani, Andrew Cuomo, and Curtis Lee running to be mayor of New York City. Just last night, Donald Trump put an endorsement in. Elon Musk put an endorsement in. Children's Health Defense does not support nor oppose any candidate for office, but we do pay attention to all things medical freedom. That's why last week, my show here on CHD TV was NYC Mayor's Race and Medical Freedom. If you want to educate yourself on these candidates' position on medical freedom before you cast your ballot, go watch that show. The link will be in the show notes. There are elections all across the country. Virginia, Pennsylvania. One race I'm watching closely is in New Jersey. The governor's race in New Jersey, you have Jack Ciattarelli, the Republican, versus Mickey Sherrill, the Democrat, who's a congressperson. Again, educate yourself on these individuals' medical freedom positions before you vote. Of interest, in New Jersey, the Defender just covered that New Jersey's new health rules would strip control from families. Medical freedom groups say this in New Jersey, they could even eliminate religious exemptions from the health department if these new rules take place. So what do the candidates in New Jersey think about these regulations that are being debated and are about to be put into place? The current governor will not be there after this election. New Jersey has a novel thing, term limits. They actually term limit out their governors. So you're guaranteed to have a new governor in New Jersey. Find out what their positions are. Also, it's not just New York and New Jersey. That's just where my attention happens to be. All across the nation, there are city council elections. There are county executive elections, local county legislator elections. All politics is local. Don't sit this out wherever you are. Go and vote today. What else do we got here? Interesting headline: National Grid, the electric company, must pay two workers a total of $3.1 million for denying them remote work after the pandemic. This is related to refusal to get the COVID shot. We're seeing more and more good rulings throughout the courts, throughout the country. I'm a lead plaintiff in a case, as many of you know, backed by Children's Health Defense, Kane versus de Blasio, Kane versus City of New York. We're trying to get the Supreme Court to hear that case. We won't know for a couple of months if they hear it. But again, this was for educators fired in New York City for declining the COVID shot. The last headline I want to end on here is actually really important. SNAP benefits. Donald Trump just announced they will provide partial SNAP benefits in November. With the government shutdown, the funding for SNAP is out. And the reason Trump is funding this is because a court has ordered it. I actually just saw in the headlines breaking this morning, Mayor Eric Adams is funding $15 million towards SNAP in New York City. For me, this is a travesty across the board. Democrat, Republican, whatever. You have to be able to feed your people. To be playing politics over feeding poor people is just outrageous. Okay, so those are the headlines today. And with that, I'm able to have the honor to bring in Angela Huffman, the president of Farm Action. Angela, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Michael, and thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So you recently penned a letter to Secretary Rollins, who heads the USDA. Basically, what we said today, how to MAHA the USDA. Now, that might not be the most accurate way to put it. We had a lot of amazing signatories to this letter. You are leading the pack. Mary Holland, the CEO of Children's Health Defense, CHD, has signed on to this. Meryl Nass, who's going to be hosting the segment after me, she signed on. Over 100 people, 115, something in that number of just wonderful activists, politicians, concerned professionals signing on to this. Tell us a little bit about this letter and the importance of it.
Sure. Well, this letter came together because farmers are truly at a breaking point right now. As we note in the letter itself, we've lost over 160,000 farms just since 2017, and that amounts to 63 farms going out of business every single day. And meanwhile, corporate monopolies continue to take over more and more of our food system. And MAHA really gives us a framework and I think a once in a generation opportunity to connect food, farming, and health together. And we want USDA to turn that vision into action. So this letter is a roadmap. It's a clear path forward for USDA. Over 120 organizations, like you said, Children's Health Defense was one of the first signers. We have come together to say we want to see policies that actually help family farmers grow healthy food for Americans and not just supporting big corporations.
So there's seven main buckets here. There's like seven big asks. Let's just go through quickly what these asks are. Number one, use USDA purchasing power to support healthy food and independent, sustainable farmers. Let's go through all of them. Number two, restore local food and infrastructure programs that children and families rely on for a healthy diet. Number three, advance healthy school meals so that children are not dependent on ultra-processed foods. Amen to that. Number four, support organic and regenerative agriculture to reduce the toxic load in children's food. Number five, strengthen NRCS to protect our soil. That's natural resources conservation. Go back, Lou, 1 second. Sorry. Conservation services. Thank you. Number six, reform agriculture checkoff programs. And number seven, ensure relief programs reach all farmers, not just commodity producers. Okay, so that is a lot that we have going on there. Why don't we start off with number one? Talk to us about number one. Talk to us about the importance of that.
Yes, that's a great place to start. So this is about using USDA purchasing power for healthy, independent farmers. So a lot of folks may not know that the government is actually the largest purchaser of food in our country. What we're calling for is for USDA to direct more of their $5 billion food buying budget to independent, sustainable farmers growing healthy foods, not just the same corporations. 25 corporations receive over half of that money every single year, and it's not right. So just making that simple shift, we're not even asking for more money. We're asking to use that $5 billion that they're already buying food, shift that, and that would ensure that these taxpayer dollars are supporting real farmers, putting healthier food, organic, pasture-based, humanely raised foods into schools and these public programs.
You know, I want to talk a little bit about the MAHA Commission and the MAHA Commission report. Initially, you and I discussed this briefly yesterday too. But initially, the MAHA Commission came out with suggestions and ideas that were laid out that I believe you and Farm Action were quite supportive of. Am I correct about that?
That's right. Yep. The May report, that was the Make America Healthy Again assessment. So that was a lay of the land of what's making America's children sick. And when it came to the causes that they pointed out as it relates to the food system, they were spot on. This was the boldest statement out of the government that I've ever seen. They called out corporate consolidation and corporate influence on government policy. They called out pesticide dependence. They called out our really distorted subsidy system whereby billions in taxpayer-funded farm subsidies are going to push farmers to grow commodity crops like corn, soybeans. These are not food grade crops. These are used for livestock feed. They're used for ethanol. They're even used for ultra processed foods. So much of our policy is about driving those kind of crops. They're very chemical intensive. This report even called that out and said we need to shift and start supporting farmers growing healthy food for Americans. So that report was spot on, and we were all for it.
However, in the final report, there was a shift. And I think it's not a secret at all that industry played a very big role in helping that shift to happen. Why don't you just talk a little bit about what happened in the final report?
Yeah, there's a huge amount of corporate industry influence in Washington, D.C. We all know that. After this really outstanding report came out in May, there was a huge pushback from corporate agriculture interests. And, it seems the White House caved in a little bit because they admitted to meeting with over 100 agribusiness executives to get their input as they put together the MAHA strategy. So the strategy was meant to address the issues in the assessment report from earlier this year. So the strategy was disappointing because it didn't live up to the problems. It didn't meet those problems head on that they identified earlier this year. And it really seems that industry influence had a role in that.
Yeah. And, I know Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the founder of Children's Health Defense. I can't say enough good about him. Can't say how happy I am for him to be where he is. I just think that he has the proper vision. And I think that original report came from Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s vision. Which is absolutely fantastic. But being head of the federal health agencies is being head of the federal health agencies. That is not being the president. It is not being in charge of agriculture. It is not being in charge of the EPA. There's a whole bunch of different pieces that are going on. And it feels to me, while Kennedy is head of the MAHA Commission, he's been given that, it feels to me like these things sometimes get siloed in a way where I have no insider knowledge, but I could see it being communicated, Secretary Kennedy, you're in the health agencies. That's where you need to stay. I even think I've seen one or two senators say that to him during confirmation, like making him pledge to just stay in the federal health sector of things and not getting into agriculture or to big chemical. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I've heard the same things. I think that makes sense. I think a lot of what we're talking about in this letter and why this letter is going to USDA is because it is about food and agriculture. And those are under the jurisdiction of USDA, which for decades, we've often called USDA a satellite office of the largest corporations, or USDA Inc., because of who they have historically served. So it's a huge ship to turn around. And like I said, with this letter, we're providing a roadmap. We're really trying to bring this new energy around MAHA to show some power and to show that they need to start changing direction. And here's how to do that.
Yeah, MAHA, the USDA, ASAP. I am completely on board with you at this. I'm completely on board with that. I want to say something to you that I've heard industry say, that I've heard even just, the average American say to me. We need big agriculture. We need big ag. We need big chem to feed the world, to feed America. If we cut off glyphosate tomorrow, we would have a disaster. We wouldn't be able to feed people. There's no way we can feed people with regenerative, organic, tiny processes that will no way meet the consumption needs of billions and billions of people. What do you say to that? What do you say to that argument that not only industry has, but just the common man has as well, too?
I would love to speak to that, Michael, because we Americans used to pride ourselves on feeding the world, right? We've all heard that phrase. But today, we are actually importing 60% of our fruit, about a third of our vegetables, record amounts of beef. We actually have a $50 billion agricultural trade deficit. So for the first time, the world is feeding us now. We're not feeding the world. And this is because of our farm policies that are backwards. It's rewarding the wrong things. I mentioned this earlier. Subsidies and bailouts mostly go to these big industrial players, producers of corn and soybeans for export and for livestock feed, while the farmers growing food for us here at home are left out of those programs. And if USDA directed more of its budget toward independent farmers growing healthy food, we would rebuild our rural economy. We would strengthen our food security. We'd take a big step toward a healthier nation. But the only reason we're not there today, and the only reason we are growing all of these commodity crops, is because that's what these taxpayer dollars are going to support, and these government policies are going to support. If that shifted to support farmers growing healthy food for Americans, we would be feeding ourselves again and be a proud nation.
Hearing your response to that question made me think of bailouts, which is something that you just educated me on. Apparently, here in America, we are staring at the third farm bailout, the third agricultural bailout of this year. Why don't you talk to that a little bit?
Yes, so there was a large aid package right at the start of this year. There was a large funding package in the Big Beautiful Bill this summer, and now USDA has just pulled together $13 billion for a bailout for soybean growers, and that's to help them because they're impacted by the trade war with China. So, I think a system that can only survive based on continuous bailouts that's not a long term, that's not a sustainable, that's not a structurally sound, agriculture system when we need bailouts to prop it up. And I can tell you farmers feel the same way. Farmers don't want to rely on government bailouts. They want real markets. So we need to go at this with a fresh look at this. We need to take a step back, look at where these subsidies are going and these farm programs, and start supporting farmers to grow food for us here at home. That way we can feed ourselves, and that way farmers aren't relying on government bailouts.
Let's take a look at number 7 from the letter just one more time. Lou, let's bring that one up. The seventh and the final point that is in the letter here is ensure relief programs reach all farmers, not just commodity producers. What do you think needs to happen to make that happen? Is it really just as simple as a stroke of a pen? Or is there something that needs to change to make sure that these resources that are going to 25 companies, 50% going to 25 companies, what needs to happen to make sure that that is no longer happening and this goes in the right direction?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's really about a shift. It's about expanding these relief programs. We're not saying cut anybody out, but we're saying expand them to include fruit and vegetable growers, for example. Right now, they're getting just 4% of all the farm subsidies, and that's just backwards. So, I think that we have provided USDA with a list of programs that they could shift that money towards. Some of those have been cut, frankly, this year. For example, over $1 billion was cut from those farmers growing healthy foods, selling into local markets in their communities. That could be restored, that $1 billion right there with the stroke of a pen, for example. So, and like I said, the $5 billion in food purchasing, that could be shifted. So, it would take time and work. We need to rebuild the infrastructure for these local markets. It's not just it's not quite so simple, but it's something that can be done if we want to and we put in the effort.
Angela, you just said $1 billion was cut to what precisely? I'm sorry, repeat that.
That was to local foods programs earlier this year.
Why was that done? I mean, $1 billion going to local food programs, obviously a good thing, not a ton of money on the scale of what we're talking about in federal budgets. What's the reason when we have a MAHA administration, when MAHA brought this administration, got them over the hump to make sure they actually won? Why would they do something, I'm sorry, so brazen as to cut $1 billion into local foods? What is your outlook on that? Why would that happen?
You know, it's hard to explain. It did happen during, there were a lot of cuts, a lot of Doge cuts being made around that time. I do remember Secretary Rollins was on the record saying that that those programs were not a priority. I hope that, I hope that we can help educate her to just how important those really are, and get a focus and a priority back on those programs, because exactly, I mean, if we're trying to move MAHA forward, local foods programs, that's a place to start.
Wow. Yeah, that's a little shocking to me. I have heard it before, but hearing it again is still shocks me and a little upsetting. That's why it's so important that we continue all of these fights. I wanna connect to something that was in the headlines that I just had today. Trump is going to be restoring, I believe, half of the money towards SNAP benefits, partial benefits in November. There was a court order that is forcing this to happen. We know, most people know, there's a government shutdown, one of the longest ever that's happening, and it is now actually impacting people's stomachs, children's stomachs, and hunger right now. Mayor Eric Adams, who quite honestly not one of my favorite people in New York City, just announced $15 million in emergency funds for New York City to fill some of the gap for New York City. And while I don't like Eric Adams, I applaud him for that. We need solutions. People should not be going hungry in America. That SNAP money is part of your budget. That's not like, oh, great, we got some SNAP. No, these people are budgeting on this to just get the bare amount of subsistence that them and their family, that their children need. Talk to us a little bit about that. And I know that's not the focus of Farm Action, but how this plays in to these federal issues that you're also dealing with.
Yeah, well, I'm with you, Michael. I agree. Vulnerable people in our country shouldn't be used as political pawns, and I think both sides of the aisle need to come together and get this resolved. So USDA, the courts have ordered USDA to begin funding $5 billion for November for SNAP. That's about just under half of what's needed to fully fund SNAP for November. So that's why these states are stepping in. But at the same time, there's money out there. Just in the last week, it was announced that the administration has pulled together $13 billion for a bailout for soybean growers impacted by the trade war. Another $40 billion has been pulled together for Argentina. And that $40 billion, that would feed American SNAP recipients for 4 months. So, I think we need to look at where our priorities are and start putting Americans first, and especially those who need it the most. And then I think just going back to the bigger picture, what we've been talking about, why is healthy food so inaccessible and so expensive in the first place? Why do we have so many people unable to afford healthy food? And I think that goes back to just what we've been talking about, where these government policies and our taxpayer subsidies are going to support these commodity crops that are not feeding us. Whatever the government invests in and subsidize, that's going to be accessible and affordable for our people. So just another reason to start shifting towards farmers growing healthy foods for Americans.
It's a great point that you make. I was talking to a good friend of mine, Leland Lerman, who talked about all the effort he put into the organic food movement decades ago, fighting for organic labels, for the labels to be true, for us to know where our food came from. And he said to me, maybe I fought for the wrong thing, because in fighting for that, it made healthy, non-chemical food elite. it made it something more expensive. It made it something harder to access, and it made it something that the average person couldn't get, because it just becomes as clear as, an apple for $4 or an apple for 99 cents. And if you're struggling to get by, what are you doing? What are you grabbing? What are you giving to your kids? And it becomes a thing where healthy food has become something for the elite, something for the rich, or for those who prioritize it, and sometimes you don't even have that luxury to do that. So I'm not taking this trip because I am going to eat healthy. Those types of things that happen. I'm not even sure what my question is, but however you want to speak to that, and that idea of what you just said, this healthy foods, organic foods being almost, people being priced out, being inaccessible.
Yeah, I just think that it shouldn't be that way, and it doesn't have to be that way. We can have whatever kind of food system we want as long as we have the policy to support it. And today, those policies are not supporting organic foods. The reason that these commodity crops are so cheap is because they're subsidized. Let's start subsidizing organic foods, and that's what our
Yes.
letter to USDA is about. So we can make that shift, and we should.
Excellent. Excellent. Angela, what do you want people to do? What do you want people who've listened to us, might be a little depressed now, right? They're not really happy with everything that's being told here. Sometimes you got to deliver the bad news. But what do you want people to do? What can people do now to take action and to get engaged on these issues?
Yeah, something folks could do right now. We've got a citizen petition that backs up our letter to USDA. It's on our website right now, farmaction.us, right on the homepage. Yep, right there. Sign the petition. If folks want to sign on there, we're hosting that petition. There's a version on change.org. Moms Across America is hosting so there's lots of versions of this petition, but we're gathering all these signatures and we're going to be delivering that to USDA just as more backup support for this letter. So everybody can sign on and endorse these ideas we've been talking about today.
Fantastic. Angela Huffman from farmaction.us. Thank you so much for coming on today. Thank you for educating my audience. And I'm sure when you're ready to deliver those signatures, we're going to have you back. We're going to talk to people about just what type of action needs to go in to delivering all of that to USDA and Secretary Rollins.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you so much, Angela Huffman. Thanks so much for coming on. I've been doing more and more of the food stuff as we've been going forward, and it wasn't where I came in on my activism. It isn't the central place that I started. But man, I'm so glad I get to have these wonderful, intelligent people in this space to come on and to educate me, because it is so incredibly important. And normally is Dr. Meryl Nass who ends up doing the food stuff, usually often even right after me here on CHD TV. But she's got a different segment. I want to bring her on now, the legendary Dr. Meryl Nass. How you doing, Dr. Nass?
Hey, so good to see you again, Michael, and great to be here. And actually, I'm going to talk for a minute about food before I get into cancer with my wonderful guest, Ryan Cole. So I actually investigated that $1.1 billion that was stopped. That was a food program that was going to help small farmers, food banks, schools, and things like this. And so I investigated it last March when it was shut down. And I found that those programs had been started by the Biden administration as, there were two programs, as ways of dealing with the supply chain problems at the beginning of COVID. So they were pandemic programs. They were not intended to last forever. They were run by the states, and it looked as if they had been basically a program to give money to Democrat supporters. So they looked like they were politically biased. They were designed to give money to both farmers and recipients who were socially disadvantaged rather than necessarily economically disadvantaged. So that was part of the program. So it was to give to people of color, people whose sexual orientation might be, different than the mainstream, et cetera. And a lot of the money for that program was taken out of the Commodity Corporation, which is money really intended to stabilize the costs of commodities. And so, in my view, it was appropriate for those two programs to end. They were not well thought out programs. Their intent was not really to help the farmers or the poorest people. But they needed to be replaced with better programs. And
Right.
I think, that what Angela Huffman and Farm Action are asking for is exactly right. We need programs that are going to be fair for everyone, that will take care of the poorest people. And look, as she said, the government buys more food than any other entity in this country, and it could buy it from the farmers who need to sell it and give it to people in institutions, in schools, and in the military. And some of that food could be donated. It has always been donated to the World Food Program. A lot of those soybeans could be given. Now, again, that there are problems because it puts some farmers in third world countries out of business. But there still are starving people. There are ways to get food to the people who need it. And our government, under whichever administration, has not paid enough attention to getting that accomplished.
Yeah, I thought it was great when Angela brought up that it's all a matter of the policy incentives. Incentivize organic food, right? Why aren't the subsidies going to? So some of these things are actually pretty simple, but you just have these entrenched interests that aren't going to let go of what they've held on
Right.
to.
Everybody wants to get their cut.
Everybody wants their cut.
piece of the action. And unfortunately, that's, what politics is about.
Meryl, thank you so much for adding your analysis in here. I'm going to let you go talk to the amazing Dr. Ryan Cole now.
The doctor and musician and farmer, Ryan Cole. I hope everybody knows him. He is my go-to pathologist on many questions. And because he has a really deep understanding about cancer and the COVID vaccines and how they relate to each other, I wanted to get granular with him about how the COVID vaccines affect cancer. And before I do that, I want to ask Ryan, who, by the way, was trained at the Mayo Clinic, what is cancer?
Well, in a very simple way, cancer is uncontrolled growth of abnormal cells with the ability to spread either locally or spread to other parts of the body. So, we have cells all day long that are turning over our skin. We grow a new skin every 14 to 28 days or so. Our gut lining turns over every week or two. So cells in our body are continuously replacing themselves. But what happens with cancer cells is as they grow, they don't turn off. And so cells generally have a certain lifespan, and we expect certain cells in our body to do their job for a certain amount of time. But cancer cells take these mechanisms that all other cells have and run away with them and decide to misbehave and behave badly and not turn off. And then they decide to not hang in their own neighborhood, and then they run away to other parts of the body where they continue to grow as well. So it's basically dysregulated cell growth of abnormal cells.
Okay, now, why do we form them? Do we form them all the time?
Well, that's a good question. And the short answer is yes. We have trillions of cells in our body. And as I mentioned, we have cells that are replicating all the time to become new cells, to become new muscle, to become new airway lining cells, skin cells, gut lining cells. Every now and then that process can go incorrectly, but we have correction mechanisms in the body. These are DNA repair mechanisms or cell repair mechanisms, and or we have an ability for the body to say, hey, that cell was supposed to be a new gut lining cell or airway lining cell, but it did it incorrectly. So when that happens, our immune system says, hey, you're not looking or acting like a normal cell. So we have a surveillance system of our T cells. We have killer cells that'll come along and get rid of these cells that have proliferated incorrectly. So every day we have a few cells that have misbehaved, become the wrong cell, but we're supposed to have an immune surveillance that says, let's get rid of that cell. And that process normally happens in most cases.
Okay. Now, what happens when you've gotten a COVID vaccine or multiple doses of COVID vaccines?
Well, let's share the good news first. The good news is a Zogby poll about 2 years ago showed out of 100 people that got the COVID shot, 15% had a new chronic condition. That means 85% did not. So thankfully, most people are okay. Dr. Vibeke Manish out of Denmark, colleague of ours, she did a large study comparing the lots of the shots, and the majority of individuals, especially the ones that didn't even have pain at the injection site, seemed to be okay after the shot. It was almost as though there were lots that acted like a placebo. There was another small group that had moderate to mild to moderate reactions, and then there was a 4 to 6% group that had severe reactions. So from these surveys, it would appear that thankfully a lot of the shots either appeared to be duds and most people were okay. However, I was the first pathologist in the world back in 2021, and I had predicted this, unfortunately, after the rollout of the shots, this being a genetic injection and a genetic transfection agent. I had predicted that we would see dysregulation of cells and likely an increase in cancer. And at the time, I was seeing about 40,000 biopsies a year in the laboratory through the microscope, which is a pretty good statistical set. And so year over year, I can tell trends. And I noticed after the shots rolled out an increase in certain types of cancer. And so, as we hear in the airport, if you see something, say something. Well, I said something. I said, I'm seeing a concerning trend. I did call colleagues in other pathology laboratories at a couple of universities. They saw the trend as well. They weren't willing to speak up. But since then, we've heard the term turbo cancer, or cancers that are behaving aggressively or more quickly than we expect, and especially across age groups that are surprising, in much younger age groups than one would expect for many types of cancer. And the term turbo cancer is kind of a colloquial term. It was coined by my colleague, Dr. Uta Kruger, in Sweden, and she's a breast pathologist, and she noticed an increase in size of breast cancers, the rate of growth of the breast cancers, the aggressiveness of the cancers. And so across the world, we've seen patients appear stage 4 in cancers that would normally have symptoms first and be stage 1 or stage 2 and not progress so rapidly. I've talked to oncologists who, in all their years of practice, are shocked by the amount of cancers in young patients they're seeing. So there are many mechanisms whereby these shots can induce a cancer.
Okay, let me just stop you and
Yeah, I could ramble forever.
Let me recap what you've just said. So in people, so there's a small percentage of people, 4 to 6%, who've had a serious, life-changing medical issue after getting the shots. And there's about another 10% that have had a more minor medical issue. The other 85% appear to be fine. Of those with these severe problems, some of them have developed cancers, and the cancers are not acting, many of them, or most of them, are not acting in the way pathologists had gotten used to. So a typical cell type cancer would have a certain typical growth pattern and response to treatment, but you're seeing something different now They seem to grow faster. And what about their response to treatment?
That's the other challenging thing. And in conversation with oncologists, some of the usual cancer protocols that they use have been ineffective. So they seem to be more treatment resistant than previous cancers. I'm not saying all of them are, but from the colleagues I've talked to that do treat cancer in oncology, many of the subclasses of cancer that are presenting at a more aggressive stage tend to be less responsive to therapy than usual.
Are there alternative therapies that may be useful in these cancers?
That is a fascinating question, and there are groups of physicians that are using innovative approaches with repurposed drugs that do have, in many cases, beneficial outcomes. I have a friend of my parents who had a prostate cancer, and I had recommended a certain protocol, and he had a prostate cancer that had spread. I think he only got one shot, but interestingly, he tried the protocol and 9 months later is now cancer-free. And that was a prostate cancer. He used ivermectin, he used near-infrared light therapy, methylene blue, lactoferrin, high-dose vitamin D. There are studies prior to the experimentation into off-label or innovative use of older drugs. There had been some studies that showed these drugs were adjunctive, were helpful in chemo regimens. So for breast cancer, chemo plus ivermectin in previous studies had shown benefit. In pancreatic cancer, gemcitabine plus ivermectin showed better outcomes. There had been some older studies on mebendazole and glioblastomas. And so many of these drugs have more than just one mechanism of action. Yes, ivermectin's an antiparasitic, it's also an antiviral, but it has 20 mechanisms of action. It doesn't read a textbook and say, hey, I'm only allowed to do what the book says. It does a lot of other things. And a very important thing it does, so the spike protein from both COVID and from the shot can suppress a very important chemical in our body called interferon type 1. And when we get an infection, usually interferon type 1 revs up and recruits other immune cells to fight off an infection or fight off cancer. And so it's an important signal for our army of white blood cells to kill cancers. The spike protein suppresses that interferon type 1 signal. Well, ivermectin, one of the many mechanisms, and one of the important ones, is it says to the nucleus of the cell, hey, let's make more of this interferon type 1, which then signals to other cells in the body, hey, it's time to fight. We have a fight on, whether it's a virus or whether it's cancer cells. So that's one of the many mechanisms. And cancers, it's kind of misunderstood. So for years we thought, oh, it's just a break of the genes or break of the chromosomes and the DNA's gone bad, and that's what we think cancer is. However, more recent studies, and I like the work of Dr. Thomas Seyfried out of Boston, cancer is more of a metabolic disease than we've considered in the past. And what does that mean? It means it uses a certain pathway to help give itself energy. And part of that pathway is dependency on sugar and an amino acid called glutamine. So by starving cancers, that's another way that we can limit its growth or inhibit its growth. So this is more at the metabolic or the mitochondrial level of the cell. And you can actually take mitochondria from a cancer cell and put it in a normal cell, and that normal...
Put it in a normal person, a normal animal?
Well, yeah, so you can take a cell that's normal and a cell that's cancerous. And if you take the mitochondria out of the cancer cell and put it in the normal cell, even though the nucleus and the DNA of that normal cell, those were normal, once that mitochondria from the cancer cell is in it, now that normal cell becomes cancerous. Now, vice versa.
Oh. Now the mitochondria does have DNA.
Yes, it does. It has a very different DNA than our nuclear DNA. It's a more ancient DNA. And your mitochondria are kind of your nuclear power plants of your cell. And when you have chronic conditions or disruption of mitochondrial activity, your cell has less energy. When your cell has less energy, then that can lead to breaks in the genes within the nucleus. So the mitochondria is critically important in not just the energy of the cell, but all the cells making up an organ, and then all the organs making up the body. So you can take the mitochondria from a normal cell and put them into a cancer cell, and now that cancer cell no longer behaves as a cancer cell. So a lot of the theory behind what we thought was just, genetic breaks in the nucleus of a cell, actually a lot of cancer behavior has more to do with those powerhouses of our cell. And so by doing things that upregulate the strength and the energy and activity of our mitochondria, those things can also slow down cancer growth or benefit our ability to fight off cancer. And what are those things? Well, exercise, sunlight, infrared light that we get from morning sunshine and evening sunshine, avoiding blue light, our toxic light environment can inhibit our energy and cellular activity. Doing good things like hyperbaric oxygen if you have access, and other things that help stimulate good cell growth are sauna. We developed something called heat shock proteins from regular sauna use, and or when we shock the body with cold. So in the morning, like this morning, I took my shower, and then the last minute of the shower turned it as cold as it can go, because we have some lazy cells in our body that have not quite turned over or gone away yet. And when we shock the body, it's called a hormetic effect, then it tells the bone marrow to kick out new, fresh cells. So that's another thing that can increase the energy of our cells. It also is good for mood as well. It increases norepinephrine, dopamine for hours on end. So there's a lot of benefits of, we get too comfortable sometimes in our workaday Western lifestyles. But if we do allow our body certain stressors, then those mitochondria grow stronger and our immune cells grow stronger as well. So yes, there are repurposed drugs used in innovative ways that can fight off cancer and are showing benefit. There are lifestyle changes like cutting sugars and fasting that are showing benefits in fighting off cancer. And there are certainly lifestyle changes such as exercise and using hot and cold therapy, hyperbaric therapy, getting adequate sunshine. And there are many supplements that are helpful as well in cancers that are anti-inflammatory. Excess inflammation can also lead to chronic irritation of cells, which can eventually lead to cancer as well. So there's just so many different mechanisms, but there are things we can do to try to stave off cancer or augment our fight against it.
Let's go back, and could you talk about mechanisms that our bodies naturally have to kill cancer cells or to stop their growth or to inhibit them in some way? And then tell us how the COVID vaccines may influence those natural mechanisms that we have to avoid cancer.
Yeah, great question. So we have a family of genes called tumor suppressor genes. And this whole family of genes, they're the ones that signal to our immune system, hey, when you see a bad cell, make sure you take it out. So they have these little enzymes. One is a little sword called a perforin, and another is a granzyme. It's a little hand grenade. So when they see those atypical cells, they get the message from these tumor suppressor genes to make sure that tumor growth can't happen. Or if a cell inside itself, that gene may say, hey, we're becoming abnormal, let's not allow this. So we have those. We have the repair mechanisms that can be go haywire. Then there's another thing, basically it's an immune escape. So there's another family of genes. P53 is one family. Then most women have heard of the BRCA1 gene for breast cancer. Well, the spike protein can bind to those and turn those off. So those are some of the mechanisms that can allow cancer to take off. The Yale study that came out a couple months back showed immune exhaustion. So our T cells are critically important in fighting off cancer. And when those go quiet, we don't have the ability to fight cancer. And that also is because of the chronic presence of spike protein. We have little microRNAs in our body that aren't coding for proteins, but are actually responsible for tumor suppression. And those get downregulated. That interferon gets downregulated by the spike protein. And then the other problem that we have is the persistence of the spike protein is binding and awakening dormant cancers. A lot of cancers are very hormonally dependent, estrogen or progesterone receptors. And the spike protein is known to trigger binding of that estrogen receptor on cells. And then I think one of the more important ones is the more shots people got, they make an atypical antibody called IgG4. I'm a beekeeper. You've heard me tell this story before. I want to be able to tolerate certain things. If I get stung a couple times a year, no big deal. My immune system says, hey, we're just going to not hyperreact. We've made this little antibody that talks to some of your T cells, which talks to other immune cells and says, hey, don't hyperreact. That's great for allergens. That's not good for a pathogen, but we also know when IgG4 goes up, cancer pathways are also dysregulated and the ability to fight off cancer goes away. So that's one of the many other mechanisms. And then the synthetic RNA did one other really bad thing. It didn't just make the spike protein. It also made Frankenstein proteins. It didn't just make the code that the manufacturers had intended. It slipped, and like reading words in a book, cut off the first word of every letter, and all of a sudden each word becomes a different word. And so other atypical Frankenstein-like proteins are circulating, causing autoimmune conditions and potentially causing gene breaks and misreading of messages within the cell, within the proteins. Plus, these shots had an atypical monkey virus in them, simian virus 40, that had contaminated the polio shots years ago. And part of the sequence is within these injections, the promoter region of it is, which can also bind those suppressor genes. There's just so many things that go wrong, messing up our kidney, renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system, and a signal there, like blah, blah, blah.
Let me just jump in for a second to say that. So the SV40 genes, and there were more than one, only were found in the Pfizer vaccine. They were not found in the Moderna or the Novavax vaccines or the AstraZeneca or Johnson & Johnson, as far as we know. But they had to have been deliberately placed there. So the spike protein was different. Actually, were those genes on the spike? The SV40 genes, were they on the spike or were they on a different?
No, they were on the contaminating DNA. They weren't supposed to show up.
Ah, they were on the DNA, right, the plasmid DNA. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so, okay, so in order to make, in a cheaper way, the vaccine, the Pfizer company used E. coli plasmids to produce, which contain DNA to produce RNA. And then what they're supposed to do is use an enzyme that will destroy DNA and only leave the RNA behind. But they didn't do a good job of that. And so a huge amount of the E. coli DNA was left behind. This is circular DNA, and on it were these two simian virus 40, at least two, codes for proteins. And also these proteins that were coded, and we can assume that the code was read by the RNA in our bodies and turned into SV40 proteins. They enabled these whatever to get inside the nucleus of the cells. So they sort of opened a door into the nucleus and made it easier for various things to enter, markedly increasing the possibility of mutations. Have I got that right?
Correct. And Moderna also used a plasmid DNA, and Moderna is also contaminated with little circles of DNA. And it's interesting because the CEO of Moderna, Bancel, had a patent several years ago saying, hey, it's critically important to get these plasmids out of any RNA product because they can mess up the immune system and they can be oncogenic or cancer causing. So the CEO of Moderna knew that that was a problem, yet his product as well also had contaminating DNA plasmids. So both companies, their plasmids were different, but they both were contaminated by hundreds of folds, which is highly concerning because that means hundreds of billions of copies of DNA that's protected by little fat bubbles, the lipid nanoparticles, so it can fuse with your cells. It can get into the cell. It can get into the nucleus. And so all of these things are kind of a perfect storm of things gone wrong.
Right. Okay. Let's go back. So now you've got multiple potential toxic exposures from a single vaccine. But then we also are eating foods, we're exposed to water and things in our environment that are toxic and potentially carcinogenic. For instance, certain of the forever chemicals, PFOS, which is still in the environment. What do we know about synergy between these other exposures and the vaccine exposure?
Yeah, this is a very great question. I'm glad you asked it. So we also know that that spike protein can get into our gut microbes, and that microbiome is so important. And importantly, we have a very critical bacteria, bifidobacteria, that Dr. Hazen researches. And the spike protein and COVID wipes out the good bifidobacteria. We also know that Roundup, glyphosate, Monsanto actually patented as an antibiotic, which also through the shikimate pathway kills that same family of good, healthy gut bacteria and allowing the less favorable gut bacteria to survive. So much of our immune system is tuned by our gut. And I like to say, we hear the saying, you are what you eat. That's not true. You are what you ate. All life is a sponge or a straw. We're sticking our straw into a sponge that stuck its straw into a sponge. So when these chemicals go upcycle into us from the soil, into the plant, into us, into our gut, well, a lot of those same pathways that spike protein can harm, so these other chemicals can as well. So we end up with an altered gut biome, and when our gut biome is altered, then our immune system is altered, then our cancer surveillance is altered. So it all intertwines, unfortunately, and we do live in a toxic soup. And that's why focusing on health and wellness in the best way each of us individually can is so critically important.
You mentioned Thomas Seyfried before, who is a biologist in Boston, PhD, who has suggested that a diet in which we maintain ketosis will starve cancer cells because primarily they use fermentation rather than oxidative phosphorus. So they tend not to use oxygen. I got to stop myself from going into the TCA cycle and the other mechanisms. So basically, cancer cells in general use glucose to produce energy at using a much less efficient mechanism. And if we can starve them of glucose, they can't use fat as the way we do to make energy. So is there actually evidence? So the theory is that if you stayed on a ketotic diet, you ate very few carbohydrates, you would be able to control your cancer. So that's a good theory, but does it actually work? So what's the evidence in people that it might work?
Yeah, there are some good studies that Dr. Seyfried has put together, and he's working with several clinics that are using this. There are also some drugs that will block glutamine. Now, we make glutamine, so we can't completely eliminate glutamine from the cancer, because some cancers like melanomas or pancreatic will use a little more glutamine than glucose. But there are some clinical drugs and clinical trials that can block that for pulses of time. You need glutamine for a lot of cell processes, so you can't cut that off altogether. Now, you can cut out sugar altogether. Now, our body will always make a little bit of blood sugar, but you can, by getting your blood sugar lower, you can starve that cancer, because it is very dependent on just those pathways in terms of energy. So it's a good generalization. It has shown benefit in many studies in terms of decreasing the rate of growth of the cancer, and in some cases reversing the cancer altogether.
What about taking supplements such as bifidobacteria supplements?
Not everything is what they say they say on the label. I know Dr. Hazen went and took about 26 yogurts off the shelf and kefirs and things like that. Only 3 of them actually had bifido. Taking a good probiotic, eating a fermented raw like kimchi or sauerkraut, and kefirs like goat milk kefir, giving your gut biome a good blend of healthy bacteria is important. The healthier the gut, the stronger the immune response. And supplements, yes, vitamin D, EGCG from green tea, which is epigallocatechin gallate, that will inhibit the vascular. Tumors grow their own blood vessel supply, and having that EGCG from green tea will inhibit those vessels within tumor. Turmeric has a really strong effect. Then the other thing that we hear all the time, seed oils. Well, your membranes of your cells are very important. It keeps the inside of the cell inside the cell and the outside of the cell outside. But seed oils will make that membrane mushy. And here's what's fascinating. Cancers have a different voltage. All of our cells have a very micro mini voltage to them. And so cancers are less depolar or more depolarized than most of our cells. But eating a seed oil diet changes the polarization of our cells and changes the charge on our cells. And so having an improperly charged cell causes metabolic dysfunction as well. And we've known this since the 1940s, and somehow it went away in science, and now we're just researching it again and finding that cancer and its cell potentials are different than all the other cells in the body. But if you feed yourself junk like seed oils, it messes up the membranes of your other cells and the ability of your other cells to function normally as well.
All right. Well, we're getting towards the end. What else do you want to tell our audience about how to avoid cancer or treat it?
Well, probably the best way to avoid cancer is to cut out processed food, cut out seed oils, get as much sunshine as humanly possible, get sleep, move your body, and don't take genetic shots ever again. If you had 1, don't take 2. If you had 2, don't take 3. For future shots, if they're doing these with RNA, obviously avoid them. And for those who are suffering cancer, don't give up hope. We're learning new things every day. There are a lot of things to try. Are there still good treatments in oncology? There are. Are a lot of them harsh on the body and things I personally wouldn't do? There are. So it's a personal choice. You have to have informed consent as to what you're going through, but seek some of these innovative alternative options that are out there as well, or in conjunction with your treatments. So my heart goes out to anybody who's suffering. I do think we need to do more research, and we need to continue to demand that the government put funding into new therapies for the harms that were done by these genetic injections.
Yeah, and let me say that mRNA shots are not the only ones we should be concerned about, because they are developing more DNA shots as well. So as you may remember, the AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson were based on a DNA model using a viral vector to move genes into that DNA. And more vaccines are being developed using that type of model, and we don't want that either. The Ebola shot, for instance, is a DNA shot. Let's just
Even some of the older shots, like the Gardasil, has contaminating DNA in it. And
yes.
many of the other shots have contaminating DNA. And so, look, I think our cells were meant to work the way they're supposed to work without all this interference from these contaminants, from all these injections that they
Right.
want to put into people's bodies. I agree with you 1,000%, Dr. Nass. We just should avoid this garbage in our bodies.
Yeah. So, but let me also say that many shots have small amounts of DNA and protein from the bacteria and the viruses that they've used to develop those vaccines. But these COVID shots and the Ebola shot, which is primarily DNA, have huge amounts of DNA, and nobody has any. I mean, nobody really knows quantitatively how bad that's going to be for us. But we have seen an example here and there that shows that this DNA, yes, can get into your normal cells and can cause some disruption. So the more there is, the worse it's going to be. We can assume that, I think, safely. And we just need to avoid them. And we need to avoid these for our animals as well, because for some reason they are the hot new thing in biology. And there's a lot of companies hoping to make, their $1 billion on RNA or DNA products. And the consumer needs to say no.
Yeah, that's an entire other show on what they're doing with animals, but I agree with you 1,000%. Whether it's livestock, commodity animals, or our own pets, they're trying to sneak this type of technology into that industry since humans are waking up to the nonsense. But the animals, we need to protect them as well because that trickles down to our environment and to our food supply. So critically important that you bring that up.
All right. Thank you so much, Ryan, for coming
Always an honor, Dr. Nass. It's wonderful to see you. Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll have to do this again. Maybe hey, one important question I forgot to ask. There are people who tell me they have specimens from people who have died that they want investigated to see if there is spike protein in their cells. Is it possible to do that test in the United States or anywhere in the world?
The only lab doing it right now is Germany. I was doing it until all of my board attacks, and I've spent most of my time just in legal battles instead of doing what I should be doing, and that's sitting at a microscope and re-ramping up. I sold everything I had just to keep my family going, and they took me down for a reason. I was doing it at the moment. I'm on a hiatus. The only lab that I know of right now doing the staining is in Germany. I was working briefly with the lab down in Florida. We're trying to get it ramped up again where they do the stains and I can do the interpretation. So
that's Michael Mertz's lab in Germany?
It was his. There's another group there in Germany and a clinic in Cyprus, but all the lab testing is being done in Germany. So it's completely available. It's one of the most basic lab tests we've been doing for decades in pathology. There's no reason every university lab in America and every private lab in America shouldn't be doing this. It's easy to get antibodies and stain tissues. It should be demanded of every laboratory, every hospital system, every university should have this. It is a joke why they're not doing it. It is, I think, professional.
Right, because they don't want to be attacked the way you've been attacked.
Yeah, well, there is that. That's why they made an example of me. But it is professional negligence and medical negligence not to be able to do something so simple in those settings.
What clinic in Florida is looking into this?
Well, it's a private lab that would do the staining, and I would end up doing the interpretation. So we're trying to get those antibodies out of Germany, and there's another lab I've been communicating with in Japan where I can get the antibodies to stain the tissue. So I'm working to get those again. Since I don't have the equipment to do the staining, I certainly have the microscope. I'm trying to get one or two other labs to stain those tissues, and then they can send the slides to me for interpretation. So I'm trying to ramp up and get that going again.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Is there any way people in our audience can help you if they want to?
I finally started a Substack. It's Dr. Cole. spelled out DOCTORCOLE, Dr. Cole at Substack.com. So I finally just signed up there. You can reach me through Substack. And then my website is the letter R, Cole, COLEMD.com. And I've got a message board there and a donation site if you want to help me with my legal battles, which is always appreciated. And I'm always just grateful for Children's Health Defense and what you guys do, and just to be affiliated with you guys in any way I can help. I'm just grateful, and you have a wonderful audience all around the world, and just grateful to reach so many wonderful people. So thank you, Meryl.
Thank you.
All right, we are live. Can you tell us your name, please?
My name is Jeremiah Blonde.
All right, and this is the story about your aunt.
Yes, my aunt Nancy Archer, who I was very close with. She had been there for me all my life, and through my father's death and many other really trying times. And she was a massage therapist and a healer, and she healed me a lot, and just was there for me and for so many people. She was loving, and it's very into natural medicine and not going along with what the government has people do. But for some reason, she took the Pfizer vaccine.
Why do you think that was? If she was so into natural, what happened?
Well, she lived on a very tight Social Security budget, so she lived half the year in Guatemala, and she has a family there and people there, and she was very afraid that she would be stranded somewhere. And so she got the first shot, and she's like, oh, no more, not doing that again. And then I think a month or two later, she went ahead and got the second shot before she flew out to Guatemala. And so while she was in Guatemala, she started feeling like a lump in her gut, and like a hard sensation from the inside and out. And she, wanted to treat it naturally, whatever it was, but she really didn't want to know. So she didn't come back to the States and go to the doctor. And she basically wanted to heal naturally, meditation, those kinds of things. And she just started feeling worse and worse, and felt the lump getting bigger and bigger. And she finally went through the VA, and it took them a long time to make any kind of determination, but they were vacillating between ovarian cancer and mesentery cancer and the appendix cancer, and then eventually got to a point where they said, we can't really help you, it's everywhere in your abdomen. And that was about, I think that took from her last shot approximately 12 months to get to that point where medicine didn't even think they had an answer. So she chose to go without chemo, and she lasted a few more months. We had a family reunion with her, and she knew she was going to go, but it was very hard to watch her. And of course, I advised her many times not to get the shot, and it was heartbreaking to watch her succumb to what I feel are terrible cancer from the effects of the shot.
Did she think the shot gave her the cancer? Did she ever talk about it?
She didn't really want to talk about it, but she knows that I talked to her about it, but I was also trying to focus on remedies and helping her. But yeah, I think she did acknowledge that it was most likely from the shot at one point.
It's so sad.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
She left behind a lot of loved ones all over the northern hemisphere. She was a community builder and a massage therapist, and she at her memorial, all of her friends were her clients. She just had a community around her everywhere.
And what about you? Did you take the shot?
No, I did not.
What about your children or family?
No. My wife and I have been in the medical medical freedom movement and the informed consent movement, all of our children's lives, and especially 2018 when the measles scare hit Seattle. Our children, twins at the time, were told they couldn't go to, my twins at the time were told they couldn't go to preschool where they were going because there were some parents pressuring the director not to let vaccinated children.
Unvaccinated.
I'm sorry, not to let unvaccinated, thank you.
So your children have had no vaccinations?
No, except for the vitamin K. I wasn't prepared for that. My older son, who's 18 now, was born at home and he had no injections his whole life, went through public school in Washington, thanks to Informed Choice Washington for all their tireless work and keeping freedom for children that don't have vaccines.
So are your children healthy?
Yes, they are, for the most part. My younger son has gone through some bowel issues that thankfully vitamin D K2 just made 100% better, which was a grace from God. It's very, very scary. But other than that, my kids are very healthy. My son was tested for COVID because he was a wrestler in 2022, even when his teammates weren't because they were vaccinated and he was unvaccinated. And he never even tested positive for COVID. Never got sick, even when the rest of us did. He's got an amazing immune system, and I'm very grateful that his mom agreed with me not to vaccinate him.
Always good when you're on the same page.
That's a tiny miracle because that's the only thing we agreed on. But God works in beautiful ways, and we're here still in Seattle. We know a lot of beautiful people in the freedom community and medical freedom and informed consent community, and I'm grateful to have you, Polly, and Children's Health Defense. It's really been there for us in the last 6 years. So grateful.
Well, thank you for that. Anything else you want to add?
No, thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
History doesn't wait. This is our moment to rise, unite, and reclaim our children's health.
Join us here in Austin, Texas this November at the Children's Health Defense Conference.
In the wake of unprecedented medical overreach and censorship, the world is waking up, and people like you are leading the way.
We're at a turning point in history. With the pandemic behind us, our fight for freedom and health has reached the global stage.
This is our moment of truth, and we're ready to seize it together.
And Children's Health Defense has been at the forefront of this charge. Our 2025 conference brings together the leaders, visionaries, and warriors who made it happen.
Meet the parents whose lives were forever changed, and hear from doctors who risked everything to speak out. Stand with those who refused to be silenced.
You are going to hear from world-renowned speakers, doctors, and frontline leaders driving the medical freedom movement. Discover real-world solutions grounded in science, integrity, and human rights.
Join the discussion to talk about vaccines, informed consent, parental rights, and so much more.
And you'll, of course, hear from your favorite CHD personalities, sharing the latest on CHD's research, litigation, and outreach.
And while you're there, soak up the energy, culture, and music of beautiful Austin, Texas.
Whether you're a parent, a practitioner, or a medical freedom advocate, this is your call to action to protect what matters most.
Be part of the movement that is rewriting the story for generations to come.
So please join us.
Join us.
Join us. Let's make history together in Austin.